Let's have 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, where we talk about stuff that's got nothing to do with coronavirus. Because believe it or not, loads of other important things are still happening right across the world. So I'm back to bring you the latest roundup of all the big news stories that you might have missed, starting with this.
There's a whole fleet of them, look on the ASA. My gosh.
The US Department of Defense has just released this declassified footage that appears to show a fleet of UFOs flying over the Pacific Ocean. Obviously, some people now reckon this is proof of alien life, but experts say that other explanations are more likely. Still, the videos are pretty weird. In the small country of Armenia, politicians got so angry with each other, they ended up having a full-on punch-up right in the middle of their national parliament. Loads of them joined in, from different political parties. Even the Prime Minister himself was in the room at the time. The US government has been accused of secretly commanding a group of private mercenaries to stage an armed intervention in Venezuela in order to topple the left-wing president Nicolas Maduro. Dozens of people have now been arrested in Venezuela over the alleged plot, including 2 men who used to be in the US Special Forces. Donald Trump, however, he's denied having any links to the group. In the African country of Niger, locals filmed this massive cloud of dust, which was floating high above the capital city. Apparently, it was caused by a sandstorm rising hundreds of meters into the air. Protesters in Lebanon have clashed with riot police after a huge surge in the price of food. They smashed up banks and started fires by throwing Molotov cocktails. In recent weeks, the local currency has crashed, losing more than half of its value. And the protesters say, if nothing is done, then people are going to die from hunger. These people live in a slum neighbourhood of Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, and they've just had their homes demolished. That's why they've taken to the streets to protest. City officials claimed that they didn't have legal permission to build houses in the area, so they came along and knocked everything down, leaving the residents, who were already very poor, with nothing. This is a giant hornet, also known as a murder hornet. They grow up to 2 inches long, and on rare occasions they can actually kill human beings. Right now in America, they're causing a panic because they've been sighted in Washington state. But experts say it's not humans who should be worried, it's ordinary honeybees, which the giant hornets feed on.
De toda mancha. Alejo el momento.
This priest was leading an online prayer service when an earthquake struck. The tremors hit the south of Puerto Rico, briefly knocking out power in some homes. This baby manatee was rescued off the coast of Florida after being separated from its mother. When volunteers pulled her out of the water, they found the creature was underweight and had an infection, but it's now been treated and taken to safety. In Uzbekistan, thousands of people have been evacuated after a dam burst, which flooded the villages nearby. Sadly, 2 children were killed and more than 50 people ended up in hospital. This enormous fire started in Nigeria when a tanker flipped over and spilt fuel right in front of a petrol station. The locals helped firefighters to put out the blaze, but sadly, at least 1 person died. And when gallons of water finally smothered the flames, the crowd erupted into cheers. Now, unfortunately, conflict and violence is all too common in Afghanistan. But earlier this month, there was a militant attack so horrific that it sent shockwaves around the country. Gunmen stormed a maternity hospital in the capital, Kabul, and killed dozens of people, including 2 babies, mothers, and nurses. Apparently, while police tried to take down the attackers, security forces were desperately trying to evacuate as many babies and mothers as they possibly could.
Mustafa al-Kadhimi.
Iraq has got a new Prime Minister, Mustafa al-Kadhimi. He used to be the country's former spy chief, but now he's got a tough political task ahead of him, as Iraq faces a major economic crisis because oil revenues have fallen so much. In East Africa, heavy flooding has killed hundreds of people, and many thousands more have reportedly lost their homes. Here in Somalia, entire towns have been submerged in water, with buildings and bridges being washed away. Now, in many countries around the world, leaning out of your window and banging a saucepan has become a show of support towards doctors and nurses fighting coronavirus. But in Serbia, it's a protest against the country's populist authorities, who they accuse of curbing democracy and freedom of the press. The conflict in Libya, meanwhile, looks set to deepen, with forces dividing the country between East and West. This was the scene at the end of April, men celebrating in support of Eastern forces trying to capture the capital city, Tripoli. But since then, that side has suffered a heavy setback because Libya's official government, backed by the UN, has taken control of a key military base. Here's a bit of good news for once. New technology at a hospital in Gaza means that children with cancer will at last have access to clean water. Gaza's water supply is dire due to the conflict with Israel, poor infrastructure and contamination. But this new atmospheric water generator is going to produce 800 litres of pure water every day for the main paediatric hospital. While the rest of the world is worried about coronavirus, zoo animals have been having the time of their lives, with the place all to themselves. In the US state of Utah, police pulled over a car that was swerving all over the highway. But when the officer went up to speak to the driver, he had a bit of a surprise.
He was 5 years old. He'll be 6 next month. He told me initially that he was going to his sister's house. I asked him if he knew where his sister lived. Yes. Where does she live? California. So he was going to try to get to his sister's house in California. He told another trooper later, while we were investigating, trying to find the family, that he wanted to buy a Lamborghini when he got there. And he showed a wallet with $3.
Now, these videos are supposed to mainly be about stories you might have missed because of coronavirus. But that's not the case with our final story, the protests in America, which have been all over the news. But I thought we needed to include it anyway because of how important it is. The protests were originally sparked after a black man called George Floyd died at the hands of Minnesota police. Footage shows a white officer kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck while he was pinned to the floor and saying repeatedly, "I can't breathe." The truth is, we can't really do this story justice here in just a few seconds. But we've already done loads of other, more in-depth videos about George Floyd and what's going on in America. So make sure you check them out and hit subscribe for more.